the sanctions is much more strategic than just Ukraine. I think what we witness in Ukraine is the quintessence of the Western course, strategic course, to marginalize Russia, to contain Russia, to stop Russia's development, and to reduce Russia to zero role in world politics and world economy, world trade, world sports, art, science, education. And we observe unprecedented steps our Western colleagues are taking. And one of the underlying trends is the United States' desire, which has been much more manifested by the Biden administration, to come back to unipolar world. The European Union already, I think 99% stopped trying to be independent. President Macron, of course, keeps repeating that strategic autonomy for the European Union is his goal, and he would be fighting for it, but my guess is that he would not succeed. Germany is already absolutely ready to be under the United States orders. The leaders of the opposition and of the so-called Maidan, the radicals like Dmitry Yarosh, was saying, we stand for Ukraine without Ruskis and Katsabs, which is Muscovites. And he publicly stated that if the Russians, well, he said the Russians in Crimea would never think Ukrainian, would never speak Ukrainian, would never glorify the heroes, meaning Bandera and Shukhevich and other collaborators of Hitler, then the Russians must be, and that's why the Russians must be swiped out of Crimea. Actually, this was said a couple of weeks before the Crimeans eventually decided to go to referendum. And by the way, the idea that Russians should get out of Ukraine is still very much on the mind of politicians in this country. And President Zelensky, in September last year, said, if you believe you're a Russian, if you believe you want to be a Russian, and if you want to be friendly with Russia, go to Russia. He said this just a few months ago. When people say, when the Americans and Western Europeans and others say that Russia was defeated in the General Assembly because vast majority of countries voted against the Russian action in Ukraine, it's misleading. Because if you take the population represented by the countries who were not voting against Russia, and especially if you take the number of countries who introduced sanctions against Russia, majority of those who voted against us did so under huge pressure, under blackmail, including, I know this for sure, including the threats to individual delegates regarding the assets in the United States, bank accounts, children studying in universities, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely unprecedented blackmail and pressure without any scruples. So majority of those countries who voted with the West, they did not and they would not introduce sanctions against Russia. They believe that it's, you know, not very big price to pay for their own practical cooperation with Russia, just to vote on something which is needed for the West for entirely propagandistic purposes. Recently, the military of Russia, together with Donetsk and Lugansk forces, discovered documents of the Ukrainian general staff indicating clearly that they were preparing a massive attack against Donetsk and Lugansk republics. But another set of documents which was discovered is, as you said, documents related to military biological activity of the United States in Ukraine. The documents with signatures of Ukrainian officials, US military. Those laboratories are created, have been created by the United States all over the world, more than 300 laboratories in various countries, many of them on the perimeter of the Russian Federation and the former Soviet republics, including Ukraine. Ukraine is probably the biggest project for the Pentagon, who is running this show, the Special Defense Threat Reduction Agency of the Pentagon is in charge of this biological activity, and they're developing very dangerous pathogens, including plague, including brucellosis, anthrax, many others. By the way, the Americans some years ago decided that it is too dangerous to do these things on their own soil. So they moved all these threatening and dangerous activities to other countries, and more they concentrate their research and experiments around the borders of the Russian Federation and China. Ukraine understands that Joe Biden, whatever you think of some of his statements, is a very experienced politician, and he understands that it is absolutely inadmissible to establish something like a no-fly zone, to provide planes to Ukraine, and to do other things which will bring the risk of direct confrontation between NATO and Russia immediately. But Zelensky also understands that there are much less responsible politicians in the United States who are being agitated by Ukrainian lobby and just driven by Russophobic feelings, and many of them are in Congress. And as you know, they adopt every now and then resolutions condemning Russia, threatening Russia, and I believe he is counting on them pushing the president in the direction of a more confrontational approach.